I'm just going to mute everyone as well. I'm going to mute. I'm going to keep George on the line. Who else we got? Mum. I'm going to mute Dave. I'm going to mute Sam. All right. So for those who can see my background, I've got Michael Jordan, number 45. And if you've been keeping up with the Last Dance documentary series, Michael Jordan's made numerous returns to basketball. And the biggest thing was when he quit basketball, he retired from basketball and went to baseball. One of the things that we noticed is he had to train really differently for baseball as well. But when he was coming from baseball back into basketball, his fitness was not the same, and it actually showed. It was quite evident when he was on the basketball court. So that's part of the reason why I had chosen the 45. Michael Jordan was the return to basketball. I'm just going to put Josh on mute. I think that's sorted it. Oh, it might be George's audio. That's right. So tonight we've got George from Healthy Bodies. So George is going to be co-hosting or co-presenting with me. He's going to provide more from a sports medicine point of view, in terms of what he sees, or some of the examples, but also in terms of the practical side or application of what we really need to be focusing on in terms when it comes to returning to training, sport, specifically during this time, but also from a injury prevention, returning from injury as well. So this can be applied, this idea or model can be easily applied for someone who's injured themselves, like Nick, Sam, Karen, anyone who's injured themselves. We can use these ideas or principles to actually guide and make the correct choices when it comes to exercise prescription, load management, but then making adequate choices and progressions throughout the actual process. So the introduction to returning to training or returning to sport. Sorry, I'm just going to mute George's microphone. Just getting a lot of feedback. So I'm just going to mute you, George, and I'll let you come in after. That's better. So introduction to returning to training and sport. So we're going to break it down into different sections. The first one's going to be the physiology of returning. We're going to talk about in terms of the adaptations that you get from training, but also what happens to those training-induced adaptations. And then we're also going to talk about muscle memory, what people think muscle memory is. It's technically the muscles do have a level of memory, but in terms of the actual mechanism, I'll explain a little bit more. Next after that is the psychology of returning. So the whole idea is with this is we're managing expectations. That's better. We're managing expectations of the individual. And I've got kind of like a display of what people think it is versus what is actually going on. And also an actual model of how much volume we should actually be increasing it in a sporting context, but also it can be applied within a general pop context. So someone who's done zero training and who just wants to get back into the training or the gym, we can easily apply this general idea or concept to them as well. There also what happens when training is ramped up too quickly. So in terms of the physiology side, we know that we get to a point where if we train too much too soon, or too much load, too much intensity way too soon, the potential implications to that, and George will discuss a little bit more about that as well. Then we're also going to go through injury prevention strategies. So that's basically the whole idea is to do no harm whilst we're going through this whole process. The potential of injury, the potential of all the soft tissue side, but also the potential of the long-term issues is actually quite high if you don't get the early stages right. So we really want to nail that side first. But then we're going to look at the practical applications. So the main message is do no harm and slowly ramp it up, but we'll explain more. So the physiology of returning. So when we train, we get all these physiological adaptations. So increasing bone density, bone strength, muscle size, the contractile velocity, or how fast or how much force a muscle fiber can produce, the quality of our tendons, strength, the structure, also the coordination of whole body movement. Another point that people don't realize is insulin sensitivity. So if you've got an individual who's overweight or pre-diabetic, and they have been training and they've gone from being diagnosed with diabetes to pre-diabetic with metabolic syndrome, or they've even been cleared, this is actually the most critical part they need to focus on, is insulin sensitivity side, is because strength training helps to shuttle the glucose from the bloodstream into the muscles. So it helps to keep those blood sugar levels down, or controlled in this case. VO2 max, so it's just a cardiovascular fitness. For those who don't know what VO2 max is, it's basically the maximum amount of oxygen you can get in per minute. And it's dependent on body weight. Then what we're going to look at a bit more specifically today is muscle mass in the cross-sectional area of muscle, the decrease in tissue quality, and the decreased rate of recovery. So a lot of people will go back into the gym or go back to normal training, sports training, whatever it may be. In the first 2 weeks, they're going to find that they're going to pull up a lot sore, and their ability to recover is going to be diminished. And I'll explain a little bit more later on, but this is part of the reason why we actually want to slowly ramp up training. Now, if you notice down here in the chart, is when we have this point of detraining, and if we only decrease training volume by certain amounts, it's going to take us a little bit of time to actually get back into this state, into our level of fitness, essentially, pre-stopping. So this is why we really encourage people to not go straight to bed rest, or just to be able to do some level of physical activity, even if it's just a 50% drop, because we know that if you look here, if you have a 50% drop in training volume, it's not actually a total 50% drop in terms of the ability to return back to their normal starting point. Hopefully that makes sense. If you start to get this 70% drop in training, then we go down quite far. It does take a few weeks to get back into it. So even if you've done some level of training, it will take you a couple of weeks to get back into it. But the longer or the greater the decrease in training, the longer it'll take to return, or if you're on total rest, it's going to take quite a while to actually return back to that. So the main message is, if you've managed to maintain your level of fitness, awesome. If you've had some level of reduction in training volume and intensity, you'll have some detraining effect. It'll take a little bit of time. But as we start to decrease the training load, we start to get into the 5 to 10, 15 to 20% of detraining, and it'll take a few weeks to several weeks to really return back up. And this is why we want to slowly ramp up over time. The muscle memory. So I think the concept of muscle memory does get mixed up quite a bit. And this is what we're really talking about. So this is where we're talking about, this is like a muscle fibers just bundled together. Each muscle fiber will have nuclei within each cell, within each muscle fiber. What happens is, when we do any form of training, the muscles get bigger, larger, and all that jazz. We get more of these nuclei, or satellite cells in this case. And we basically, over time, we develop where we have more satellite cells. And satellite cells are, I guess, the signalers to help us to repair, grow, get strong, specifically to the muscle fibers that we're training. As we go through some level of detraining, we actually decrease in the muscle size, but those satellite cells actually remain there. But as we start to ramp up training and go back into retraining, we still have those satellite cells, So therefore, we're actually able to get back up to a level of fitness in a shorter period of time. So this is all hypothetical. If this is taking us 12 weeks to get to this point, and we go back down to this point here, it might take us maybe 4 to 6 weeks. So in terms of that muscle memory, it allows you to get back up to that level of fitness, or in terms of the muscle itself, that size and strength, a lot sooner compared to an untrained muscle fibers. All right, so the psychology of returning. So this is more about managing expectations. And if you notice what on the left here is, this is what we're likely to see. Now, don't worry about the two different colors. What we're going to see when people return to the gym, they're going to see this massive spike in training volume. So they're almost going to have, the first week is the intro week. Their second week, they're going to ramp it up to like 90% of what they normally do. And they're probably going to go up to about 100% by the third week. Now, what we do know is if we ramp it up too quickly, we reduce our ability to recover. So our recovery rate would be really poor. So what we want to do is actually, if you look onto the right, is if you notice this one, it slowly ramps it up over time. So it doesn't matter what the sport is or the context is or whatever it may be, there's a slowly ramping up of training volume. Now, if we go into a more sport-specific context, what we want to focus on is just the general training. So general physical preparedness. So conditioning, speed, power, and strength. And we're not even introducing any specific training yet. So any specific skills. As we start to go on with time, we want to start to increase the amount of specific training that we are exposed to. And as we get closer and closer to the camps and competition, we need to be focusing more on specific training, more and less on the general training. So, and therefore we can actually just call this more of like a maintenance of our general fitness, whilst we're focusing heavily on sport specific. So skill, tactics, practice, stuff that's actually going to allow us to perform specifically in our sport really well. So for Nick, it's just all about just developing general fitness, maybe a little bit of skill-based work, and just slowly ramping up the total volume that he's exposed to, but decreasing the amounts of general training over time as he gets closer and closer to the competition. This on the left-hand side is probably what we're going to see most of, especially in junior sport, because little planning has actually gone into managing loads and training expectations. And more likely, you're going to find people that are very impatient on this left-hand side. And therefore, they're going to hit this point where they feel like their fitness is hit a wall very quickly, and they're going to become discouraged as a result. So what we want to do is basically over time is begin just to ramp it up over time. Then as I mentioned before, if we ramp up training volume too quickly, it increases the likelihood of injury. So when we've gone, I'm going to flick back a little bit to here, the physiology of returning, and we see a decrease in induced training adaptations. Muscle mass, cross-sectional area is one of them. The other one I didn't put in is basically tendon strength. And if we have muscle mass or muscular strength and tendon strength, then we know that we have a real potential for tears, ruptures, when we have a massive increase in intensity of the task, the movement, the training session, or whatever it may be. All right, I'm going to pass it off over to George. George, if you want to unmute yourself, then I'll let him carry on from here. Oh, there you go.
Cool. All good?
Yep.
Cool. Well, thanks for having me, firstly, guys. So as Trent was saying, guys, the main thing I wanted to speak about today, particularly from a physio perspective, was how to prevent injuries. So Obviously, at the moment, a lot of people are training from home. They're possibly changing the way they train, given they may have limited equipment. People are doing much different things to what they're used to. So, like Trent was saying, once they get back to their regular training and they ramp things up, that's when obviously injury is likely to occur. So, I think some of the main things that I sort of recommend to my patients in order to monitor their training and say reduce the likelihood of injury is firstly, we're going a bit back to front here, but keeping a training diary. So, and monitoring your training volume, so your sets, your reps, and your loads, so how much weight you're using at the gym, or for running, it's either distance or time, and also your RPE. So the guys that are in an athlete would obviously be aware of your RPE, so your rate of perceived exertion, and it's just sort of a scale of 0 to 10 in terms of how strenuous you found a particular activity. So say, for example, something like a squat or a bench press, if someone's performing 60 kilo bench for 10 reps or whatever it is, and they say that their rate of perceived exertion is sort of like a 6 out of 10, it's likely for someone that's sort of trying to improve their hypertrophy or get bigger muscles, that they're not pushing where they should be. They should probably be increasing the load slightly to have some sort of adaptation, like Trent was saying before. More so from a physio perspective, I'm big on pain diaries, which accompany your training diary. So anyone that has knee pain, back pain, all the above, particularly that experience it during exercise, I'm big on people monitoring if they get any pain during exercise. If so, what was the cause? And so was it leg day, and was it the squats that hurt your back, for example, or hurt your knee? And rating that out of 10. So obviously 10 being the worst pain imaginable. So you tend to ask patients, what's this out of 10? And they'll be like, oh, the pain's 11 out of 10, 11 out of 10. So obviously they're not understanding that spectrum, but 10 out of 10 is the worst possible pain imaginable. And even more important for things like tendons, so an Achilles tendon, patella tendon, those sort of things, a lot of injuries or conditions you won't actually feel to the next day. So something like an Achilles tendon that's sore or that's overloaded, you might not feel it till the next morning. So having a pain score out of 10 for the following day or the following night, whatever it is, allows you to monitor your pain. So if you're doing X amount of sets and reps and weights and performing these exercises at this intensity, you need to look at that and see, am I pushing myself a little bit too hard? Is it this exercise that I need to modify to reduce my pain scores? So I think that's quite important. And with that training diary, you can obviously incorporate things such as, any sleep disturbances, like sleep quality, emotional issues, things at work, anything else that you find that influences your training at the end of the day. And the main thing I think as well, I think it's good for people to have a basic understanding of the basic sort of training principles. So again, something the guys at Inner Athlete would be well familiar with would be progressive overload. So it's something that people tend to get a bit stuck with sometimes, where they perform the same exercise all the time at the same repetitions, or they go for the same run, whereas their goal might be to get fitter, stronger, faster, but you can't expect to do the same thing and get a different result. So in basic terms, the concept of progressive overload is providing the body with a stimuli that is great enough for the body to require it to adapt and make change. So whether that's increasing the sets, the reps, whether you're running for longer, whether you're running harder, having that overload is important to make even a little bit of progress. And I think, again, with a bit of a physio spin-off, progressing your exercises appropriately, I think, is even more important. So you get a lot of people who are performing walking lunges, for example, but I'll sort of regress them a bit and get them to show me how do you do an isometrical, how do you do a lunge hold. So obviously just sitting in the lunge position, keeping the hip, the knee, the ankle in line. Can you hold this position for X amount of time? I'll get them, lunge holding well before they're doing walking lunges. The amount of control required for a walking lunge, amount of control through the hip and knee, is quite large. So a likely progression would be more so, can you lunge hold? Can you do a static lunge? Can you do a sort of split squat on a step? Well before you do a walking lunge. So having that understanding where obviously having the guys in an athlete or any other sort of coach where you've got that guidance is important. So being able to modify the exercise to make sure you're performing it correctly and overloading correctly. I won't delve into this too much, particularly because this is Trent's probably area of expertise, but obviously having a basic understanding of periodizing your training. So particularly when it comes to beginners and intermediate trainers or athletes, is being able to particularly have a linear progression. So making sure that if your goal is to build strength, that over time you need to make sure, A, you're lifting more weights, and then obviously as the weight increases, the amount of repetitions are going to drop as you increase the load. So being able to modify your variables, so your volume, your sets, your reps, your weight, to reach whatever your goals might be, which might be over sort of 6, 12-week period sort of thing, which ties into the fact that, the importance of deloading. So deloading, I think people get confused sometimes as it being a week of rest. So like, I'm going to do nothing this week. Cool. I'm going to sit on the couch. Yes, I've been running 10Ks or 15Ks for how long, or lifting this much weight, but I'm going to do nothing. It's a rest week. A deload is just a reduction in your training volume. So I tend to recommend, from sort of through what I've read and through my studies, I saw a 30 to 50% reduction, for example, in weight. So if I was benching 100 for that week, I'm going to do 70 kilos instead of the 100. So whether I'm influencing my sets, my reps, my weight, there's that 30 to 50% reduction. And I tend to recommend, this is my physio side, to apply this to the weeks where, you've got a lot on, work stressful, emotional state might not all be there, but you're going to have weeks where physically, emotionally, mentally, you're just not there. So rather than doing nothing, it's always better just to have a lighter session of whatever you can tolerate. So I think that's really important, particularly when people fall off the rails and they stop training. It's obviously hard to get back on that bandwagon, so to speak. And then lastly, just finishing with setting goals as well. So do you want to be bigger? Do you want to be stronger, faster? Do you want to run further? Whatever it is. I think the issue is a lot of times people will do 30 reps of something and call it strength training. Well, you're just doing, performing muscular endurance. You're not going to get any stronger from 30 reps. And it's something that one of my lecturers back at uni, even I still attend his seminars to this day, so Christian Barden, he would always used to say that performing a TheraBand exercise for 30 reps is not strength training. You can't call it strength training. There's still a role for particularly patients that have pain in terms of high reps, as they're better tolerated. But if your goal is to build strength, you need to build strength at the end of the day. And
so I'll stop you at that last one. So I chucked in that dot point there, the square dot point. So a lot of, I've worked in the commercial setting. If everyone knows me, I've worked in the commercial setting. The one thing I constantly hear people walking out of classes and sessions is that it's like, oh my God, I'm so sore. I feel so good. I'm like, this is the absolute shittest goal to ever strive towards.
Yeah.
Now, and part of the reason is, if you're just chasing soreness, you could just prescribe someone 100 burpees and be blown out of their ass. What we want to do is we want to evoke the appropriate stimulus. So whether it's to get bigger, we're aiming for a certain repetition range. Stronger, we're aiming to increase that intensity faster. We want to go a little bit lighter, move those loads faster. These are what all these variables need to be working towards to create. So for Karen, obviously for you is to get better. Well, now your goals have changed because we're trying to get you better for touch rugby for the end of the year. So your goal is to get faster. But in order to do that, we have to make sure that you're stronger first. Then we're going to make you more powerful. Then we'll make you faster, so you're able to perform really well, but have the robustness at the same time to be able to do it game after game after game and cover really well.
Definitely.
But glad we cleared that up, because that's one thing that peeves me off the most.
For sure.
Moving on.
Yeah.
Injury prevention strategies continue, George.
Cool. So another thing I'm pretty big on, guys, is people recording or sort of videotaping their lifts. So I've got the squat, the dead, the bench here, but whether it's a lunge or some other somewhat compound exercise, I get patients I'm happy for them to send me videos of their squat, their dead, their bench, or again, a walking lunge, like we said before, in order to monitor their form more than anything. I don't want them sending me videos of them bicep curling, but more so that you complicated lifts, I think, more than anything. And even though we will assess this in the clinic as well, I think it's also good for them to, a way for them to track their own progress and stay on top of, whether they're pushing their knees out more with the squat, whether they need to increase their forward lean, whether they need to lift their hips with the deadlift, whatever it is. It allows them to track their progress, and then the coach or physio, whatever it is, to also monitor it, particularly between sessions. So it might be something subtle, but it allows them to work towards their goals, like we spoke about before. And I think it's good as well in the sense that it allows them to build confidence in terms of seeing how far they've come in changing their technique, and how important it is in terms of creating your own squat or deadlift or whatever it is. So, for example, a squat is a good exercise where it's not a one-size-fits all. For someone like myself, who has a long femur and a shorter torso, I tend to fold quite a fair bit, fold forward when I squat, versus someone who's got a shorter femur and longer torso can actually stay quite upright. So again, just giving them confidence in their squat to show them that, again, how far they've come, and just little things to sort of work on along the way. I think it's really important. And the last part of this section was, if I could emphasize anything from a physio perspective, particularly post-COVID and everything else that's happening at the moment and people returning to sport, is less is more. I tend to find, particularly from a physio perspective, that there's this spectrum where, as a physio, we tend to sort of be maybe too conservative in terms of, let's do 20 sets of clams and hip abduction and not really progress things enough. And then I also see the PT side of things, where I've got personal trainers I work closely with that will tell me that they'll feel that, the patient, so the client isn't happy unless they're, like Trent said, they're really sore, or, they're feeling it the next day or something like that. Whereas I think the importance of PTs and physios and coaches and all the above working together to take a client-centered approach. So whatever's in their best interest. If they want to be sore and that's their main goal, that's fine. But I'm more the mentality of, if this person is, lifting a comfortable weight that they're happy to push themselves, they're enjoying training, they're injury-free, let's keep facilitating that. That's more my sort of train of thought. A lot of times when someone will refer to us at the clinic, a trainer, a coach, wherever it is, we'll do two things. I will try and modify the activity. So if someone's getting pain with a squat, for example, I'll check, can I modify their technique to offload their knee, offload their back? If I can't, I'll then substitute that for something else. Can they do a lunge? Okay, that also aggravates the knee. My plan of attack would usually be then, let's just let the knee settle and let's just focus purely on hip-based exercises. Just let the dust settle, move on, and then reincorporate the previously provocative activities. So if I can emphasize less is more times 1,000, and just sort of, again, like Trent was saying, that gradual increase, whether that's from someone who had an injury to not had an injury, or someone just building up their strength, take your time is the take home. There's no rush. Even though we're all athletes, like Trent was saying, and he always says they're all athletes, but unless you've got a competition coming up, it doesn't really matter if after a few weeks you squat 100 versus 120. So I think definitely less is more for now.
Cool. All right, I'll let you continue on.
Cool. So I won't bore you guys too much, but I thought these five case examples I thought would at least be something that each of you hopefully could take something out of it, or take something home to apply to your own training, or help someone else sort of prevent injury. So my first case example would be, I had a gentleman who was a desk worker, so accountant for 20 years, and then decided to change his role and become a full-time gardener / landscaper with Jim's Mowing. So he went from a job which is obviously quite sedentary, wasn't moving around a lot, and then he's gone to a job where he's mowing, he's hedging, he's doing all these physical things, and he ended up with some pretty sore, pretty significant tennis elbow. So for those that don't know, tennis elbow is just like an overload condition of the muscles within the forearm. And this guy got to the point that he had overloaded his forearm so much, he, grasping simple objects, even like a pen, even pressing like his deodorant in the morning was painful. That's how sore he really was. So the fact that he went from, again, sedentary work to overloading those tendons led to a fair bit of pain. So he's someone who took a fair bit of time to settle his symptoms, but in a more easier progression, it'd be ideal for him to sort of begin with, initially weekend work. So if that was what he wanted to transition to, he might start, a Saturday afternoon, might do a bit of work, and then, have like a Monday, Wednesday, and then Monday, Wednesday, Friday with that day off in between to recover, to gradually increase the load for his forearm and everything else to cope with what he's doing. So I think that sort of case example was quite appropriate in terms of relevant to what Trent was saying about allowing your tissues to adapt. The second thing, and we see this all the time, but this guy in particular, recreational runner, he took a holiday to Queensland. This guy was really into his marathon running. He was at the time, I think, only running probably like 15, 20 Ks, gradually increasing his load. Went to Queensland for a few weeks. And during that time, for whatever reason, I think he got sick or whatever it was, but he's like, I'm not going to train. I need a break. Work's been chockers. I'm going to, just take it easy. He's come back that first week and tried to do a 20K run again. That obviously made him super sore, as expected. He let it settle for a few days. I couldn't do 20, so I was like, I'll try 18. Nah, because he had deloaded so much, well, he's offloaded because he's rested so much and then increased his load so abruptly, his patellar tendon, so the tendon at the front of his knee, was screaming. Everything was sore. Stairs, getting out of the car, everything was so sore that, again, a day-to-day task was just, he couldn't even get through. So we had to bring him back a fair bit, and we had to stop him from running. So in order for him to compete in that marathon, we were quite vigorous trying to get him back. But that's where that pain diary came in, where he had to monitor, cool, I'm back at 10 Ks at the moment. How much pain am I having during? And particularly because it's a tendon, how much pain am I waking up with? How much pain am I feeling on stairs the next day? So for those of you going on holidays, we're on a massive holiday at the moment. But if you're going to be increasing your training load and you're having some weeks off, bring it back to basics. There's no harm in starting from the beginning again. So with him, I would have at least started with, he's had a few weeks off, even back to at least 10K, halving his load, and then again, gradually building it back up. The next one, did you have anything to add to that one at all, Trent?
I think with that one, it was really good just managing expectations right there. Just to be like, hey, we need to really take things back to literally to an elementary standard first. Let's see what your body can tolerate, let your body recover, and let's just slowly sprinkle in just a little bit more. And we slowly allow your body to adapt. The body doesn't like drastic changes. I think that's the biggest message here.
Definitely. Cool. And just the next case example as well. So local footballer tears hamstring, first game of the season. So I think particularly from a physio perspective, over the off season, we know that whether it's the guys or girls, particularly in the younger age groups, during the off season, during the pre-season in particular, it's important to obviously gradually increase their running load. So how much they're doing. You find in particular, you guys sort of 20 to 25, they tend to be a lot into your weights. So over the summer, we'll sort of neglect the running and particularly focus on the weight training. And what actually happens is your hamstring gets used to all that sort of compressive loads, and in comparison to when you're running, where there's more tensile forces involved, and because they've focused so much on contracting, rather than getting that sort of elasticness that you want from a tendon and a hamstring, where it stores energy and releases energy, if they haven't built up their running to a sufficient training load in terms of getting some miles in the legs, firstly, so some distance, getting to sprinting, and then change of direction, and then having that game-specific training, the likelihood of them tearing their hammy is obviously quite high. So there's a fair bit of research to show that sprint training, so building up to sprint training and being able to sprint at maximal effort, is actually protective against sustaining a hamstring injury. So the more time you have, the better. So starting obviously earlier in the off season, early in the pre-season, to build that up. Whereas a lot of the guys that I tend to know, footy-wise, will probably spend the summer drinking rather than training. So some might not even be doing weights. Some are simply just resting and taking the time off. But unfortunately, they're the ones that tend to cop it from an injury perspective. So I see your sprint work and that graded sort of steady increase in load as a preventative measure. So similar to exercise, in the sense that exercise is seen as a vaccine. So it gives you things like increases in heart rate, increases in blood pressure, that all these things in the long term are detrimental. But in the short term, it exposes you to these things so you can build a tolerance, so it can protect you against cardiovascular disease and all these other conditions. Same with, again, increasing your running load. So I thought, again, when we're talking about sport, I thought that was pretty relevant as well. And then just the last two examples. Again, another really common one. Retail worker sustains disc injury from lifting 5 kilo box at work. So a lot of times, particularly within the clinic, you'll get someone that's coming with a clear disc injury in terms of significant lower limbs, like leg symptoms, that lacerating sort of nerve pain. And change the slide so I can't. Sorry. And sort of those clear disc pathology, that those disky back pains. And a lot of people will think, yes, I was just, I was moving something under the couch. I was lifting that 5 kilo box at work, like this lady here. Had someone that was, what was he lifting? He was lifting a crate, like an empty milk crate, for example, which is less than 5 kilos. A lot of the times, disc injuries are something that tend to occur over time. It's the fact that you've probably been lifting incorrectly for a prolonged period. Your general strength and health and fitness probably isn't the best as well. And I think as well, not being fearful of certain movements. So people that have hurt their back, you find anyone that's hurt their back bending forward is always fearful of bending forward. There's probably some of you that have experienced it before. So I try and educate these patients and guide them as much as I can to let them know that in order to safely lift something up, you need to practice lifting. You need to practice bending forward safely to have that sort of graded exposure. But if you avoid all these things for so long, it's kind of, or do them incorrectly, it's kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. So with this lady in particular, I think it's just over time lifting things incorrectly that it's just pushed her over the edge. There may be some genetic factors as well that has made the disc a bit weaker, but it's left her more susceptible to a disc injury. So again, it's something that happens over time. Excessive loads in a poor fashion lead to these sort of things. And that's why I tend to recommend that. I'm a big believer in strength training, irrespective of your age. So I know Trent's spoken before about sort of sarcopenia and those sort of things, that age-related loss in muscle mass. So I think even being a little bit stronger definitely makes a difference. And I tend to preach this even to people like tradies. So a lot of tradies will be like, yep, I'm lifting all day. I'm obviously, their jobs, a lot of them are quite laboursome, but I try and educate them the fact that you're not an average person. You don't have an average job. Thus, you need to be stronger than the average person to be able to tolerate what you're doing. Even like some of the mums I've got at the moment, being a little bit stronger in order to lift their child off the ground, play with their child to reduce the likelihood of injury. I think it's just equally as important. I've got one lady at the moment, I love giving examples, has had back pain for the last 5 years, has done Pilates for the last 5 years, and just hasn't improved. She's telling me, whenever I pick up my daughter, sore. Playing with my daughter, sore, all the above. And I sort of educated her on the importance of being that little bit stronger to be able to deal with, changing nappies at the table in an awkward position, all these other things that are going to allow her to deal with her day. And for the first time in 5 years, she doesn't have back pain. So I think it's warranted for people to get just that sort of little bit stronger. And last but not least, this would be something that all of us would see on a very regular basis. So newbie hurts back or lower back, performing HIIT training for the first time. So at the clinic, one of the main things that we see is someone that hasn't had much experience in the gym will do some sort of HIIT or interval training, so high intensity interval training or a circuit type training involving squats, deadlifts, all the above. And particularly those that don't have a training background in the gym, you get them in these classes performing things a lot quicker, a lot heavier than they should be, end up coming to the clinic. So particularly with these big movements like your squat, your deadlift, your bench, I recommend to people going into these interval training type classes, making sure that you have the foundation. So whether you see someone, again, like Trent, or someone that's going to coach you and make sure, are you squatting correctly? Are you deadlifting correctly? Are you moving well enough to warrant to be able to increase the weight and do it fast, do it vigorously? Because the amount of times we see someone's done some sort of interval class, I hurt my back doing a jump squat. I hurt my back doing a deadlift. I haven't deadlifted before and I'm doing 40 kilos for 50 reps. My mentality is with that sort of training is, again, get really good in the gym, and I rather someone lift a bit heavier. So I rather someone lift 100 kilos for one repetition, not fatigued, than 50 kilos for 20 reps. Because it's fatigue that will likely cause them to get injured rather than the actual load themselves. So I think, definitely having that foundation before you get into that sort of type of training is imperative to avoiding injury and making sure we don't see you every week.
Yeah, I think that's really good. That last one is super common. I've had numerous consults of people do a HIIT class. Next thing you know, something's happened, and 9 times out of 10, the mechanism of the injury is fatigue at the end of the day. So definitely something that we preach is to earn the right to go heavy, also earn the right to actually go intense in this case. That's good. Thanks, George. All right. So I'm going to give you guys a bit of a practical application in terms of what it actually looks like. And this is one of the clients that we have at the moment. And basically what we've done is this is just 2 weeks. So what we've done is she's trained before. So her name's Jane. So she trained with us about 5 months ago. She had a hiatus for her own reasons. And what we did is the first thing that we did is we move our way across is we did exercises that she felt comfortable with and she enjoyed. So the first thing we want to focus on is the enjoyment factor. And number 2, we want to stick to things that she's familiar with. And we ended up ticking those 2 boxes, also prescribing things that I feel like is going to benefit her because she works a desk-bound job, to make sure that she's able to still move in all planes of motion relatively well. So we've got split squats, dumbbell rows, Swiss ball rollout, single leg RDLs, and kneeling push-ups. So I've kept it super simple, like 5 or 6 exercises. She does a warm-up on top of this as well. In terms of the actual sets, what we've done is we've started her at 2 sets. And when it comes to exercise prescription for someone who's new or returning to training, usually it's between 1 to 3 sets, depends on how it's prescribed. If it's really high repetitions, then basically just do 1 set. If it's like 15 plus repetitions, it'd be 1 set. But what I've done is I've got to do 2 sets. Now, the reason why I've got to do 2 sets is the second set she'll probably end up performing a lot better in terms of technique. That's why I like these types of programs where if you're doing multiple sets to a point, each set will get a little bit easier. And everyone's experienced this that's done strength training, but has been exposed to structure in their training, is each set gets a little bit better over time. Then if we scroll across, I've got the reps, 10 to 12 repetitions. I've given her a range, except for this last one here, and that's just a bit of a mental toughness kind of thing, kind of like what we've just discussed before, where she sets her own parameters on where she ends the set. But in terms of the rep ranges, now we're trying to work on more the just general, I call it hypertrophy, strength endurance realm. We've got this 3 sets. Sorry, gone off track. 10 to 12 is ideally I'd wanted to get to 15 repetitions, but I'm keeping her just below that threshold. So I'm trying to get her to push herself to a certain level. So each set or week, she's trying to aim to increase the repetitions, or in this case, on week 1 to week 2, we've actually increased the set. So if she might do 2 sets of 10, then week 2, she might do 3 sets of 10 on the exercise. Or she might do 2 sets of 12 and 3 sets of 10. We know that's an increase in load. It's just, if you do the numbers, it adds up to being more repetitions and more weight at the end of the day. More repetitions performed at that weight, sorry. The one thing we focus on is tempo as well. Now, George mentioned before, when it comes to regression, making sure that people can perform certain exercises correctly. This is just as important for someone who's returning back to training, is we're getting the person or the individual to do it in a controlled fashion first. And this is an easy way to increase the intensity, is just by manipulating the tempo. So tempo is the speed of the movement. So how slow you go down, how long you pause at the bottom, how fast you come up, and how long you pause at the top. So what we've done is we've gone very traditional, very 3 down, 1 at the bottom, 1 on the way up. So very controlled on the eccentric part, or loading ourselves into position, or where the muscles go under the stretch or load in this case. And she's basically, we're just building up over time. So later on down the track, I don't need to use tempo. She'll know the speed of the movement at the end of the day. So if you get someone to count how fast they should move, it kind of becomes ingrained at the end of the day in terms of how fast they should move, also relative to the weight that they're using as well. So if someone's using a lighter weight, they're probably going to move it a little bit faster. If someone's using a heavy weight, probably need to focus more on that, just that controlled side. And that's pretty much it. And we're obviously just tracking how much weight and how many repetitions that she's performing for these exercises as well. And we're just gradually building. And week 3, I've kept it the same. I haven't prescribed anything different. She basically said after the end of week 1, she'll soar. Okay, cool. It's good to know. Week 2, all right, she'll soar. That was a little less. All right, that's even better. Week 3, she'll probably be able to push herself a little bit more. Probably doing maybe 3 sets of 12. Fine, that's good. She might be a little less sore again. So we know that she's starting to make progress, and that muscle memory is kind of coming back, and she's adapting really well to the program. And we know it's not too strenuous, because we're getting this feedback that she's recovering really well, and she's been able to increase her repetitions throughout the set. And that's pretty much it. So this was a bit of a beast of a presentation. What we'll do is we'll unmute everyone and see if anyone's got any questions or wants to chuck in the 2 cents. All right, we'll start off with Inez.
Yes.
What were your thoughts? What did you like? What we thought was interesting?
Too much information for me. Too much information. No, it's okay. It's yes. Everything makes sense, and yes, I want to go back to the actual gym, because sometimes I'm not sure whether I'm doing the thing correctly. I'm doing repetitions, and the body sometimes, is sore, but according to me, I recover very well. So, yeah, but it's good. Everything makes sense.
Cool. And for you personally, that's just a discussion that we need to have. That's all it really is at the end of the day. Cool. Karen. Hang on, we'll start mute. Yeah, there we go.
I had Trent on the phone when I was doing an exercise one day. He said, slow down, which is normally what I need to do. And I hear it in the gym all the time. Karen, slow down. So I'm with you. I'd love to go back to the gym, but I've got that constantly in my mind when I'm doing exercises now. Slow down. That's my life. It's too fast. I'm a convert anyhow, because I don't like to feel sore after I go to gym or do any exercise, because I have to function. And I think when you're sore after exercise, you've just done far too much. It's ridiculous. There's too much recovery anyhow. When I leave, I know you ask every day, Trent, how are you feeling? And I go, good, which is good, because you're on that little endorphin high, and you're on it for a little while, and then the next day you feel really buzzy, which I love. Not sore, sometimes sore if there's a new exercise and it puts a little bit of stress on a different muscle. That's fine. You can cope with that. But, you know, those HIIT classes, I have been in those and been pushed by people and have refused to be pushed, and even still couldn't walk for 2 days, you know, and function for 2 days. So, yeah, it's not a good thing at all, is it?
No.
But, yeah, great presentation, and explained it very, very well, really well for me, who knows what you're talking about. And I think I've learned something as well, which is great. Thank you. Thanks, George.
That's okay.
Nice.
Anytime.
Good. Brit, let's see if you've been paying attention.
Oh, and I learned how to make scrunchies.
Oh, yeah. Here, look, all my scrunchies.
Oh,
I was sitting over my sewing machine, but no, it's a good presentation, Trent and George. I learned some things, and I haven't exercised for a little while.
So what's the key lesson there then?
I need to get up and move, and my
But
hands for repetition, so I need to stop doing that.
But in terms of get back into moving, what's the main lesson there? In terms of getting back into training, what's the main lesson?
I don't know. You put me on the spot.
Yeah, I know. Crack under pressure.
Like,
Cool.
Less is more.
less is more.
There you go. So less is more. So we need to slowly ramp up the amount of training that you're doing over time. We're not going back straight into doing, 80, 90 kilo deadlifts. It might be something simple, started with 40 to 50 kilos and just gradually building.
Yeah.
Good. Dave.
Yeah. Man, I got a lot to say, because especially with my experience with return to training and people coming from 0 to 100, but I guess coming back to that, this is more whole thing is I like to use the analogy of a plane taking off. So obviously you want to start off slow and you're picking up momentum, and then once you've got that momentum, then you can take off. That's a good way to, I guess, explain it. Obviously you don't want to be a helicopter. Don't be a helicopter and just go straight.
Yeah, that's actually a good one. I like that.
Take off. That's one way I explain it. I'm actually the HIIT training is I always ask, because I work at 2 gyms, actually in another gym, but I run group classes there as well. And I always ask at the start, what's your experience? Are you beginner, intermediate, advanced? And normally you can tell if someone's advanced or not. And I ask them, do you have any injuries? Because that way I can plan that in my mind and say, okay, like they have a bit of knee pain, okay, I won't get them doing any knee dominant exercises, that sort of stuff. But saying that there's nothing wrong with maybe sort of floating on the edge of that movement just to help maybe strengthen up if they're not doing anything for it. Yeah, but I guess that plan analogy is the one that I would put out there. Yeah, cool.
Oh, that's a good one. I really like that one. That's good. Mum, what are your thoughts? Hang on, you're on mute. There we go.
When you mentioned about the mother with the kid changing nappies, it brought me back to when I had Trent. Actually, I had tennis elbow.
Oh, okay.
He was so bloody heavy. My arm was, and I had to have physio. So it brought me back to that. Interesting. And the other thing was the rubber band, because there's a lot of preaching about the rubber bands, but it's not really, it's good for rehab and everything, but that's about it, isn't it?
I think it's good for, I think the thing that patients or clients, you guys call them, tend to lack a lot of awareness in terms of how to switch on the right muscle at the right time. So sometimes with the TheraBands, even though it's a light weight or light resistance, it improves your awareness of how to switch on certain muscles. And I think particularly the patients we see are in pain. So they can't tolerate heavy loads. So we tend to use a lot of TheraBand work with someone that's got a lot of pain. So I still think it has its place, but mainly more in our setting versus the S&C side of things.
So again, I know less is more, and the HIIT training, I won't go near HIIT training, not these days.
Good. Nathan.
Really good presentation. I really like those examples as well with baby and the full-time worker going from desk work to to gardening. I think we forget, especially myself. I look at sporting athletes a lot, and it's obviously common for a lot of athletes that just want to, either coming back from an injury, they either come back too early and rush it, or just anything in general. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of keen athletes coming to, after this pandemic is over, to get into sport, and we're probably going to see a lot of injuries just through that, just because they haven't tolerated enough. Having gradually progressed to that level. So, also being able to apply that to not only athletes, but to your general pop, your full-time workers and your mums and your dads and all that sort of thing. So I think that was kind of interesting to see the other examples in regards to progressively overloading intensities to be able to compensate and prepare your body for different things. I think that's a good takeaway and a good reminder for everyone. It's not just about sport. It applies to all of us.
Nick.
George, thanks for your time. It was a really good presentation.
Thanks for having me.
So good. Much like Dave, of being in team environments and everything like that, I've had a lot of people say different things, but I really think that the way that you guys approach things is the right way. And I've just got a question in regards to the activations and everything. I call them activations, and I do them every day.
Yeah.
With the mini bands and stuff, do they have to be progressed? Because I see myself getting the same results in terms of, being aware of the muscles that I'm going to use. Do those certain activation exercises have to be progressed, or?
Are you saying something similar to sort of like a crab walk or something?
Crab walk,
like that sort of thing?
Stuff like that. Like maybe hold it for longer, or okay.
So particularly if a crab walk's a good example, you might start with the yellow TheraBand or the sort of minimal resistance, and then once someone has that concept of sort of awareness of how to switch on their glute abductors or whatever it is, or being able to push their knees out, I'll then definitely increase the resistance as soon as they've got it. My goal is to build that awareness and that control, and then load them up as much as they can tolerate.
To, I guess, increase the efficiency of it, or just the actual muscle itself?
Just forcing it to cope under more load, I think. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
Cool.
and just trying to put yourself under more fatigue as well. And yeah, I think the strength component and the control component equally is sort of important. You get people who focus too much on getting super strong, for example, like a squat, but then they don't have the control where their knees constantly sort of going in. So I think if you can start to load up your control exercises a bit more by increasing the resistance, you can't go wrong, rather than just staying with like a lower TheraBand or a lot of weight. So find ways to load it up without flaring it up is the take home.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah.
I think the way that we use that type of idea is we kind of use it as a feed forward system. So if we're using mini bands, TheraBands, so for someone who has a huge valgus of the knees or something, for a squat or a split squat, something like that, then we use the band in a low threshold environment. I think Dave's done some similar stuff like this in the past.
Yeah.
Then we actually start to increase the threshold of the movement, so we start to increase the intensity of the movement over time. And whether it is we use that same movement and load it just as much as we can, or whether or not we just use it in a warm-up context. So whether it's for deadlifting, we might use a band for a couple of warm-up sets. But then if we try to use it in a maximal environment where we're going like maybe 85% plus, we need to strip it away because it's actually going to take away from something else at the end of the day. So it acts as a feed forward, feeding into the system, feeding some input into the system. But you don't want to make sure, don't want to get to the point where it takes away from something else as well. So where I know I've seen a lot of people that are trying to maximally squat with bands around their knees. I don't believe, my personal opinion, I don't believe in that. Same thing with deadlifts as well. It takes away from something else at the end of the day.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And Dave, that was an awesome analogy. I really, really like that one.
Cool. Sam.
Yeah, so as you know, Trent, a lot of my sessions I will do before I have a long shift of at work. So if I was to be sore, I will definitely not be able to do the 8 hours, which can be quite physically demanding, especially now. But I get to a point where I feel like I've accomplished something that I'm, tired, I can't do anymore, but that I'm not, I'm not sore, like I can still walk, I can still do what I need to do throughout the day. And also with, certain sessions where you need to rein back, like the load, I do come across quite a few of those days, emotionally or whatever's going on, I'll tone back what I'm doing. So I still do something, but it's just not as much as I would usually do. Because at least, something's better than nothing. And at least I can still feel like I'm, again, accomplishing something instead of just staying at home or just doing something else. Which, Trent, you're always reminding me as well, and Lorraine, to, do something or to kind of just, what's the word? Just keep track of, how things are, and if my shoulder's, sore, to, swap something up, or, just kind of maintain my training.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Is when we talk about training, right? Things aren't like finite. Like it doesn't have to be specific 75% of your 1RM, or it's not specific. The nice thing about hypertrophy training or strength training in general is you could train for strength endurance, right? Like between 20 and 30 repetitions and still get stronger. Like we know that happens. There's research to back it up. And we know that the inverse can happen as well, that we get stronger, but we also increase muscle mass, especially at high repetitions as well. So it's not the end of the day that we have to back off load, or we might back off the load quite a bit, maybe increase repetitions or get you to a different training block, we're still evoking a stimulus. And another way I like to put it is we want to stimulate, we don't want to annihilate the body. And or that HIIT training analogy that, or the example that George gave before, is literally annihilation of the body. And just nod if you know Charles Poliquin, just nod. Does everyone know Charles Poliquin? No, no. So Charles Poliquin said the best form of training, right, is when you can do 2 to 3 sets on top of what you can currently do. So if you get to the end of your session, right, and say to yourself, I can do 2 to 3 more sets, that's perfect. You're basically just below that tipping point or that threshold of annihilation. So then we know that we're in the stimulate, and you can still perform whatever you need to afterwards. You're not, like Karen said before, you're not gonna feel terribly sore. You're gonna feel like you can get on with your day, and you can continue to move on. If you go beyond that point, is your hunger's going to be thrown out of whack. You're probably going to feel like you're going to need a nap, and your energy levels is going to be depleted. So we want to make sure we're stimulating, not annihilating. But that was a good point, Sam. Thanks. All right, Josh. Josh, can you hear us, mate? No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I can hear you guys. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Cool. First, thanks for the session. I found it really valuable. It was actually a really good session to tune into. What I really liked about the session was the fact that you made towards the start where, I'm similar to Nick, where you have a various amount of coaches telling you to do different things, like jump back into where you were, just continue training as you were. But the progressive introduction back to training is actually more efficient than returning to where you were when you finished training. I found that part really valuable of the presentation.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think everyone's in the same boat. We slowly adapt over time, and that's basically what it is. It's like we don't automatically. It's like someone who's trying to put it, like, who gains 10 kilos during COVID, right? It's like you didn't suddenly gain it overnight, where they think it is overnight, but they've gained it over a couple of months. They're not all of a sudden going to lose it. It's the same thing when it comes to the sporting performance realm or the health related realm. Is it takes time to get that. It's like, and we don't become diabetics overnight. We don't become all these health conditions overnight. It takes time for us to actually get to these points when we expose ourselves to either positive stimulus or the negative stimulus. But yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, so this one was a bit of a beast, so we're going to wrap this bad boy up. Josh, thanks for coming on. First time watcher, long time viewer.
Joshy!
No, thanks for having me, guys. I'll definitely be tuning in next week.
Yeah.
I'm in the dark, mate. You won't see me.
So we're going to wrap this up. So for those who don't know, athlete development session is on this Saturday at 12 o'clock. Mum's got her walk and talk at 11 o'clock at Kingston Heath. And Sunday, 11 a.m. and we're going to be talking about what makes you happy. Is that it, Mum? Yeah, that's it. All right, we're signing out.
Thanks heaps, guys.
No worries.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, Josh White.
Bye, Nick.
Thanks, George. Thanks, Trent.
Thanks, guys. See ya.
Bye. See you Saturday.
Oh.
Brittany.
Get out.
I'll do it for you.
I can't leave.